Tonight we got a pretty good show lined up for you. I've got a woman here that had cancer or neurofibromatosis, which is not cancer. And
welcome to
and she's going to be telling us her story and about how a couple doctors, well, not a couple, but many doctors have just been putting her off because she was labeled as being psychosomatic, as basically being nuts. Okay. All right. At the end of this, we're going to put up a link to the neurofibromatosis center, so you guys make sure you check that out. Okay. You know, if you ever gone to a doctor and then you just felt like, you know, they weren't listening, or you were crazy, or they just put you off, well, that's exactly what happened to this next lady. Her name is Angie Wright. Hello, Angie.
Hi.
Okay. So, about 3 years ago, actually longer than that, I got involved with this young lady. Her name is Angie Wright again. And she had a ranch where she did horse riding for autistic children, PTSD, wounded warriors, and all that. Today, she represents the very people that she was trying to help. So I got involved with her when the kids were riding at the horse ranch and stuff, and went out and covered them and stuff. And Angie was there. She was married. And then her husband passed away about 3-4 years after I met her. And then from that point on, once he passed away, a couple of weeks after that, she started having some major problems. Couldn't figure out what it was. So why don't you pick it up from there, Angie?
Okay. Well, it kind of started when my husband passed away. I was, you know, you get your nerves are all stressed out. So I was taking what I thought was Prilosec. Well, somehow the pharmacy had made a mistake, and instead of giving me Prilosec, they had filled my prescription bottle with my husband's prescription bottle, which was glyburide. Well, it ended up, I was feeling worse, feeling more tired. My stomach was always upset. So I would take Prilosec instead of as needed. I was taking it almost every day. Well, it ended up to a point where my husband passed away in January 11th. Around the middle of February, I started blacking out while I was driving. I had multiple times where, you know, I'd be going to Gainesville to see my doctor, and they'd find me on the side of the road, blacked out. And they took me, the final one, after about 2 weeks, the final one was at Shands Hospital. Well, when I went to Shands Hospital, they found that I had diabetic medication poisoning. The doctor came in, I almost died, I went into a diabetic coma, and he said, you know, have you had any new prescriptions filled lately? And I said, yeah, and he said, okay. So we had someone take the prescription bottle while he was on the phone to a pharmacy and have it checked, and found out it was the wrong medication. While I was there for the diabetic medication poisoning, I had an episode at Shands Hospital where I could not move, I could not talk. It lasted about 5 minutes. Well, this was all documented. We went and did an MRI of my neck, and because usually when you can't move anything with your body, it's usually contribute to your neck or for your spinal cord. So they did the neck, and they found that I had, you know, some disc herniation, and I had degenerative arthritis in my neck. And they said, well, nothing that would cause it, but if it ever happened again, you know, to come back to the doctor. Well, I got out on a Monday, and I'll be honest, when my husband passed away, I had to make ends meet. So the very next day after the hospital, I went to work. I went to a job interview, went to work. The following Monday night, I blacked out on the side of the road. It was Sunday night. I couldn't move, couldn't talk, ended up back in the hospital. Everybody thought I would, because I couldn't move or talk, thought that, you know, oh, she's a drug pill popper because my teeth are bad. I mean, everybody's got problems. I don't have money to take care of my teeth. Well, as I was sitting at that hospital, the women looked at me and they said, well, you know, you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. And I says, ma'am, I can't move. At that point, I could finally talk and move my arms. And I says, ma'am, I can't move from my waist down. I said, there's something wrong. They picked me up about a foot in the air, and they pulled my pants back on me, and they picked me up and shoved me into a wheelchair and pushed me out in a waiting room.
This was which hospital?
Yeah, this was Putnam Hospital. And
when I was sitting at the hospital, they said, well, do you have anybody that can come get you? Well, it was 4:30 in the morning. I didn't want to wake anybody. And I says, no, ma'am, I don't have anybody. I intended to call my parents or my dad when 6 o'clock came around. I wasn't going to wake anybody up. I was like, I could sit here for a couple hours if everybody's fine. I can't move anyway. I didn't want to panic my family. I figured it happened once before, it'll come back, but I'm going to go see the doctor.
Now, at this point, you couldn't talk, move, or anything, right?
Well, I just had that happen the night before, but at this point, this came back, but this time, instead of my whole body coming back, I couldn't move. I still had not been able to move my waist at the time they're discharging me. So this plays into about 12 hours later after getting back home, I was able to move again. Well, I was like, that's it. The next day was Tuesday. I was on my way, because it was like Monday into Monday. The next day, I'm on my way to Gainesville. And as I'm driving to Gainesville, I don't know if anybody knows where Newman's Lake is. It's right before you get into Gainesville. It's a pull-off. I went to pull off to the road. I just got the phone with my dad. We were getting ready to plan a fishing thing. I was all excited. And just kind of, as I hung up, it's like, you just kind of feel flush. You just don't feel right. And at this time, I thought, well, maybe I was just having a little bit of a sugar thing. So I pulled off to the side of the road. I went in the bathroom, put a little water on my face. And when I went to get back out, when you're driving out of the parking lot, you can either go left or right. Right's going to take you towards Gainesville, and left will take you back to my home, which is about an hour and a half drive. Well, when I went to go to the right, I could not move my body. I didn't know what happened. It was really scary. All I could do was go left. I couldn't control my body. I'm trying my hardest to think everything through, but now I'm in a car, I'm in a vehicle, all the windows are rolled up, nobody to help me. So I ended up going across, it's, about 4-lane, Travis, with a median in the middle?
Correct.
So I ended up across the street, and it went down the road, and I kept thinking, brake, and I remember somehow the car had stopped, and my foot went, it was still, when they found me, it was still on the brake, but I had a lightning bolt pain from my foot, and it went all the way into my back of my head, and I couldn't move. For 2 hours, I sat on the side of the road. I knew everything that was going on. I'm thinking to myself, is somebody going to call 911? I'm watching the clock pass by, and finally I have someone knock on the window, and it's 2 cops. And the cop, he's like, ma'am, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm sitting there, and I'll be honest, it's like sitting there like this, people, and you can't do anything but move your eyes. Well, by this time it's 2 hours, so whatever's happened, my body still can't move. I can't talk, but, so whatever happened, it must have just passed. Well, I'm sitting there, and I have a heart monitor attached to me from all the previous episodes where I had been in and out of the hospital. They put a, what do they call those? It's, oh my goodness, I can't think of the word, but it's a monitor they hooked you to carry with you. So I have this attached to me, and because my husband had passed away, I had a picture of him in the front seat. It was just sitting there from when we'd had his memorial service. I just hadn't taken stuff out of the car yet. So one cop is in the driver's side door, and the other cop's in the passenger side door. And this is March 17th, 2015. It's a day that will live in my life forever. I cannot forget. And the one cop looks at the other, and I am pouring in sweat. You can see the sweat all over me. And the one on the passenger side says, she looks awful sweaty. Did you check to see if she was maybe hot or she's having heat stroke? And the cop on the left-hand side says, oh, well, she's fine, it's nice. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, you guys have been standing in the door, now it's breezy in here, there's air running through, and you can see I'm sweaty, but I can't say anything. So the one cop looks at the heart monitors on me, and he says, well, is this yours or your dead husband's? And I'm thinking, well, who's the one wearing the wires? So he takes the wires off me and wraps them around and puts the monitor into my purse. It's a Holter monitor, excuse me, now I can remember the word. And the ambulance people come up, and they're like, they check my blood pressure, they check everything, everything's fine, and they say, they're putting me in the ambulance, and they're like, there's no reason for any of this. And the one cop goes, oh, I've seen this before, it's called psychosomatic. And at the time, I didn't know what the word psychosomatic to myself meant. I had no idea. And I'm just sitting there like, okay, well then if they know a word, maybe they can figure it out. So I'm sitting there and I'm in the ambulance and they'll pick my arms up and they'll drop. And they'll pick my arms up and they'll drop. And they'll be like, oh, well, we just picked her up the other day. She went to North Florida Hospital. That's her normal hospital. And the other guy says, well, we're taking her to Shands because Shands doesn't deal with stuff like this. So they took me to Shands, and I'm thinking, okay, good, because this had just happened at Shands Hospital. I mean, it's what, a week and a half later? I was like, so I mean, this is great. It's already happened. It's already documented. I've got the best possible chance. Shands is the best possible hospital to go to. And we get to Shands Hospital. They wheel me in the door, and you can still feel the wind from the door open over my head. And the guy walks up beside my kneecap. I mean, you're sitting at that sit-up position. And by my kneecap, he puts the smelling salts under my nose. And I've got a migraine. You've got all these bright lights in your eyes. I can't move. I can't talk. I can't do anything. So I'm doing everything I can to look him in the eyes and show him I'm here. I'm responding. He says, I'm not dealing with her. Baker actor. And I'm just, right then, I felt so lost and so hopeless because now they're not testing me. I haven't had any tests. I just was in this hospital. Nobody's looked at my record. I haven't done anything to figure out what's going on. So they put me in a side room. And in the secondary room, it's like a holding room. As I'm sitting there, you have these women over top of you, and they're like, said her husband just died recently, and said, oh honey, I'm so sorry for your loss, and you look like you want to cry. Well, of course you want to cry. You can't speak, you can't move, nobody's there to talk for you. You can't tell them what's going on and that your body's not working. And so they put me into another area, and it's like another holding area. And while I'm sitting there, I mean, it's like, okay, so now it's nighttime, and the lights are out, so as I'm laying flat on the bed, I'm like, oh, thank goodness, somebody will come and see me laying on this bed, and I have my eyes open, and, just somebody could just ask me a question and see my eyes and, blink once for yes and twice for no, and, well, the whole night passed. Nobody came to my bed. The next morning, I guess when you're Baker active, they send you a place called Meridian, and in order to go to that place, Meridian, you have to be able to walk and stand on your own. The only reason I know this is because the guy who was coming to get the patients had a wheelchair and said unless I stood on my own, they couldn't take me. So now they pick me up, and they've got an officer on one side, an officer on the other, and there's two in front of me, and they sit me straight up.
Now, at this point, how long has it been since
This has been almost 24 hours since
Okay.
I've been in this hospital. So they sit me up, and well, now I'm looking downwards. I'm pretty much slumped over. I'm falling forward, but there's one on each side holding me up. And this young man, he was a nurse, and he's sitting on the floor slouched out, and he's looking up at me. I'm like, oh, thank God, somebody can see my eyes. He looks up at me. He says, you could walk and talk when you came in here. How come you're not doing it now? And I'm looking at him like, no, I couldn't. I'm just sitting there like, I'm frustrated because I can't speak. And he's like, oh, you could walk and talk when you come in here. How come you're not doing it now? And I said, I'm just saying in my mind, can't you understand? I haven't moved. Well, he says, that's it. I'm not dealing with her. I'm going to get the doctor. So these 4 officers pick me up. I got one on each arm or each side of me, and I got 2 on my legs. They pick me up and they fling me into the hospital bed. Now, again, I've got neck problems. We've already seen this on the MRI. And when they shoved me back in, it made my neck hurt 10 times worse. And since then, I've had nothing but migraines. And the guy came back in, and he says, oh my God, we have a problem. He said, she hasn't moved or talked since she's been in this hospital. Well, now all of a sudden I have doctors coming in and all these people coming in, and they take me to do this CT scan of my head up. And they have an officer walking with me, and they says, you realize since you've been Baker acted, you don't have access to anything else in the hospital unless we say so. And I'm sitting there thinking, my whole body's not moving. I should have access to anything I need to get what's going on. And I can't tell anybody. Well, they take me and they do the thing, and they come back, and all these doctors, they're putting needles in me. I mean, great big long 1-inch needles. They're sticking in my legs and sticking in my arms. They ask you these questions that are this long. And you're sitting there thinking to yourself, how in the world am I going to respond to these people? And they're sitting there like, well, she's not cooperating, put her in the psych ward. And I'm sitting there like, trying to blink my eyes like once for yes and twice for no to answer their questions. I'm like, well, maybe somebody's going to pick it up. And they didn't.
You would think that they would have some type of training for that.
I know. You would think. I mean, even on TV shows, you see them, hey, blink once for yes, twice for no. It would be common sense to find a way to communicate with somebody. And I mean, I get there are people that do that, but when you can't move, you have to find a way to communicate. And my only way of communication was my eyes. It would be like somebody being in a car accident. They had no idea if I had fallen and hit my head. I just had all these blackout episodes, and right before I had gone, the last one, I had fallen and hit my head on concrete. Nobody knew if I'd have fallen and did anything. They just automatically, without any test, put me into a Baker Act because they didn't want to be bothered to see what was going on. And so we're sitting there, and they put me into the actual psych ward, and I'm sitting behind four walls, and I'm thinking, okay, well, at least I'm in a room. They'll start coming in, they'll start talking to me, and they did. I come in, and they're like, well, you need to start participating in the group things. And I'm sitting there like, how am I going to participate? They got these journals. How am I going to write in a journal? I can't.
Now, at this point, were you able to move your arms up
No.
top, or everything was completely paralyzed from the neck down?
To be honest, my hands were curled up. I couldn't move from right here down. I could not move. I couldn't talk. All I could do was think. And I had no way of showing anybody that. Well, it was probably about, I don't know, about 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock that night. And I'll be honest, I begged God. I'm like, God, you've got to help me. If you don't give me anything back, you've got to give me my voice. You have no idea, unless you've been in a position where you can't talk for yourself. You have no idea how hard and how scary that is. I ask everybody to find someone to speak for you. Travis, I was blessed with in my life after my husband passed away to be able, we're best friends, that's it. I was able to ask him if something's wrong, but this was after the fact. Please come look in my eyes and make sure I'm still there. You need someone to stand up for you, know your wishes. Everybody should have that. I had nobody to speak for me. My family didn't even know where I was at this point. They hadn't found him. And that night, I want to say it was about 11, 12 o'clock at night, after just begging God, I don't care if I never moved again. And all of a sudden I had the sharpest pain, the same pain that went from my foot. I could only feel it from my neck up. I couldn't feel anything from shoulders down. From my neck up, all of a sudden this pain went into my head, and it was like an explosion went off in my head. And I screamed at the top of my lungs. And they came running in. And I told them, like, listen, it's like, wow, oh my gosh, I can hear my voice. And I told them everything. I can hear you. I knew everything was going on. I'm like, okay, now I can talk. So I explained to them everything that was going on. I told them all the way about from the car, and I was like, I was just here at the hospital, that, if you could look at my records, you can see all that. And they said, well, ma'am, we can't look in your records because once you leave the hospital, your records are closed, so we have no access to your previous visits. And I'm like, okay, so how do you know what a person has if you can't see it anymore? And so then they're going into the point, okay, well, ma'am, you like I said, I still can't move. Ma'am, you need to start participating in these group things. So, like I said, they're journals. And they said, well, if you don't participate in your journal, then we're going to have to lock you in your room. And I'm sitting there like, how in the world am I going to do this? So the next day, they got me a volunteer. Well, I'm sitting there with a volunteer. Now, remember, they've told me that I can't think for myself, basically, and that's one of the reasons I'm there. That they previously told me that the day before. And as they said, okay, they give you the biggest, what are those, the word search, where you've got you've got to find the word inside of all the big paragraph thing. Mm-hmm. So they give me one of the biggest word searches I think I've ever seen. It was almost a full page. And they're like, okay, tell the volunteer how to do that. I was like, now how in the world am I going to tell this young lady how to look on this page and look for words that are this big a page? And I'm sitting there like, have you ever played Battleship? And she says, yeah. I was like, okay, numbers down, letters across. So I'm telling her J1 to Z6, things like that. Well, we all got done at the same time. And the lady goes, well, you're pretty smart. She said, what's your story? And I explained to her what was going on. She says, ma'am, she says, you shouldn't be here. She says, you were done wrong. All the nurses up there knew I was done wrong.
So at this point, how long have you been there?
By this time, I have been in the hospital, in this psychiatric ward. I had been there about 7 days. At that point, nobody was doing any more tests. They weren't doing anything. And they came to me, and the doctor came in. I finally get to see the actual psychiatrist after about 7 days. And he says, he looks at me and he goes, "Oh, well, we're going to go ahead and do the shock therapy on you." I was like, "You aren't touching me." And he says, "Well, you're in here because you don't know your body." I was like, "Excuse me, I'm not in here for that." I said, "I'm in here because a doctor didn't do his job and find out why I can't move." I was like, "This has already happened before." And he says, "Oh, well, then he's like, "It's got to be in your head. You don't know your body." He's like, "The mind's a complicated thing." And I was like, "Listen, the body's complicated too."
Now, did you still have the paralysis at this time?
Yeah, I still couldn't move. At that point, my neck was still stiff, but I still had not been able to move. My hands were still curled up. I couldn't move my body. It was just my mouth. Now I can. We always joke, is like, ever since I've gotten my voice back, I don't shut up because I want people to know what's going on. I'm afraid to not be able to speak for myself. I'm afraid to go to the hospital now because I've had so many episodes since where I can't talk, and it scares you because you don't want to be in that position. So while I'm at the hospital, again, the doctor looks at me and he says, "Well, I'm going to do shock therapy." I says, "You are not touching me." He's like, "Well, it'll fix your brain waves. Your brain waves are what's causing this." I said, "No, sir." I said, "There's something in my body causing this. You guys have already done the test on my neck and everything. We know I have that going on." I said, "Why can't you do a test from my shoulders down?"
And he's like, "There's no need to." He's like, "It's all in your head and your neck. If you had something seriously going on, it would be in your neck."
So this is 2 doctors now that are telling you you're nuts.
It's 2 doctors now saying I'm nuts. And so I'm sitting there and I'm smiling, and they're like, he goes, "Well, that's another thing." He's like, "People that are quadriplegic, they don't smile." And I looked at him and I says, "You know what? I could sit here and I could cry about it, and I could be in the same boat when I'm done crying in 6 months." I said, "But you know what? I can talk. I couldn't talk yesterday." I said, "Now try to get me to shut up because I want you to know what's going on. I've got a voice and I'm going to speak up." And that's one of the reasons I'm on here, is because people need a voice.
So at this point, did they ask you any symptoms? Are you hurting or anything else?
Never once did they ask me that.
No, just pretty much it's your nut job.
Yeah, they kept me there. They just kept me in the room, kept trying to go to therapy, and you get all these relaxation therapies, and they take you outside. In a wheel. No, you don't even get a wheelchair. You get, because wheelchairs have metal, so those are too dangerous. So they put me in a recliner, and they pushed me into the wheelchair one day to get out. Well, my sneakers were on, and because my feet were dragging, when they pushed me out the door of the elevator, my shoes got caught in the little opening, and I went face first out onto the ground. And they stood there and watched me, and they're like, "Are you going to get up?" And I'm thinking, I just told them, I said, "I can't move." And they're like, "Well, ma'am, you need to get up." So finally, these other 2 doctors come over and help and put me back in. So we go outside, we do the walk, we come back in, and we go to, well, I can't remember what it was, but they were putting me in a Hoyer lift. I can't remember. They were changing the bedding that day. So they put me in a Hoyer lift, because this was the next day. Now I've been there probably about 9-10 days by this point.
Okay, at any point in this, did you start to think that, well, hell, maybe I am crazy?
No, never. I knew I wasn't.
Okay.
I didn't know who to reach out to. I mean, I understood that there was people that needed to be there, but I knew I wasn't one of them. But so they put me in the Hoyer lift, and as they turned the Hoyer lift, because I can't feel from the shoulders down, it's this day I still can't, even though I can move body parts now, my feet get mangled up in the actual hydraulics of the Hoyer lift, and it cut my feet all up, cut my toes all up. And the guy says, "Oh my God, she didn't feel that." So they come back in, they get it all patched up.
And this is all happening at Shands in Gainesville.
This is all at Shands in Gainesville. This is while I'm in the psychiatric ward. And that's when the nurses started coming to me, and they really, truly realized there was a problem. And when I'm sitting there, the one lady came in, and she's like, "Well, we need to get you, you don't need to be here." She's like, "I'm going to lose my job for this." But she says, "I'm going to get you to an actual physical therapy." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I was like, she said, "Brooks Rehab is the best." She's like, "I know Brooks Rehab can help you." And she says, "I'm going to get in trouble by the doctor." Well, the doctor did come down on her, and she told me the doctor got very upset with her because he said that I needed to be at Shan's facility. And she told me, she says, "You tell him you just want to be close to home." She says, "Because you got to get out of here." She said, "There's something wrong with you, and you've got to get out of the hospital. They're never going to find it." She said, "They don't want to look." She said, "There's nothing outside of the box with this doctor." So I'm like, okay, thank God. So, I'm sitting there, and, she comes in the room and she says, Miss Wright, she said, we got you set up to go to Brooks. She said, now they're going to come in and do physical therapy. Now, by now, I've been there about 11, 12 days. First time they're going to offer me physical therapy to see if they can find out what's going on. So I have these two young kids. They can't be more than 20 years old. And they walk in, and I'm sitting in the recliner. And they pick me up, and they drop me, and I hit the floor. And they laugh, and they go, oh, look, she didn't move. And they're like, well, let's try that again. So they pick me up, and they drop me. And they put me in the chair, and like, oh, well, she really didn't move. And I'm sitting there like, what in the world? They're like, well, that's called physical therapy. I said, that's called being stupid. I was like, what are you doing? Well, the next day, they had scheduled me to go to Brooks Rehab, and by now I had my aunt and uncle from Pennsylvania. They came to visit my grandmother. My family finally learned where I was, so they came to visit me. And while I'm sitting there with my family members, because I'm getting ready to leave, so they know where I'm going, the doctor walks into my room and he said, well, you can't leave until you have a bowel movement. Well, I know this sounds really cheesy and corny over the air, but I have gastroparesis. I don't have normal issues. And he's like, I'm going to make you stay. He says, you're here because you don't know your body. And I looked right in front of my aunts and uncles, and I says, no, sir, I'm here because you guys don't know what you're doing.
Now, how long was it before you were in the hospital that they actually got in touch with your family to come see you?
Over a week.
Over a week.
And then when my family did call, they refused to let my family talk to me because someone had to hold the phone for them, and that was a very big inconvenience they didn't want. So they wouldn't even allow me to speak to my family. That's why my aunt and uncles, they came with my grandmother. And so we're sitting there, and he said that, and he was trying to keep me from going. And he says, well, I'll give you some medicine. Well, that medicine would cause me to be in the hospital and have problems. And I explained that to him. I'm allergic to that. I can't have it. And he said, you don't tell me what to do. And I says, listen, you may be a doctor, but I know my body, and I am refused to take something that's going to keep me in the hospital. So the lady came in, and she said, hang in there, and all the nurses, God bless them, all the nurses got together, and somehow they got me out of that hospital. I ended up at Brooks Rehab. Now, Brooks Rehab, God bless their souls. I love them. They were the best people. They have the best facilities. And we were sitting there. They put my arms on these slings. They tried the TENS units on my hands. And, like, they would move my fingers and stuff. But, again, I still couldn't move anything. And the doctors come in, and they said that they're going to do everything they can. They tried pain patches. They tried this and that, but nothing would work. And we were sitting there. They would set me on the bike one day, and they left me on one of those rotating bicycles. And they left me there a couple hours, and they came back for me, and they thought maybe I'd be tired. I never felt it. Well, the next couple days, somewhere in that time frame, they put me on one of those TENS on my legs. And I don't know if you've ever put your tongue on a 9-volt battery, but it gets that zzz, zzz. Well, when they put the TENS unit on my legs, like I said, with the hands I didn't feel it, but you put it on my legs, and it was like it was doing that to my heart. It started increasing my heart rate so fast I couldn't take it. I couldn't breathe, so they had to pull it off it. So I sat at at Brooks Rehab till right around Easter. I was there for a couple weeks, and then I came home with my parents, and then started the trying to find a doctor to take care of me. So.
You okay?
Yeah, it's just a lot to take in.
Take a minute.
So, but
Okay, take your time.
But again, when I got home, I still couldn't move. I still couldn't do anything. And this was around Easter. Again, this is 2015. And my family would try to do everything we could, and I would sit. You always hear people say, when you're in a wheelchair, everybody backs away from you. And you think, oh, they're just, when you're not in that position, you think, oh, well, that's just their way of kind of being depressed, and everybody feels that way, that nobody's around. Well, it happens. It truly happens. People have told me that, I just can't see you like that, or I was afraid, I couldn't do it. But you know what? That's when you need your friends. That's when you need people to come around you, so you can keep your mind off that. And I would sit there for hours and days, just sitting in a wheelchair out in the hot sun, looking at the river. nobody to talk to. I can't get a drink for myself. I can't go to the bathroom for myself. I can't do anything but sit there for hours on end. And like I said, you don't truly know what that's like until you've been through it. Well, it was about, oh goodness, the day before Mother's Day, Travis, when you were there. You had just came by and you were starting to, you were working on stuff at the camp to help me out.
Yeah, the ranch was getting ready to start back up.
And
Well, at first I didn't even know where you were. It took me, because I had a few calls about, from kids, is the ranch going to start up soon? Da, 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 da. I don't know. I don't know. Let me find out where Angie's at, and then I'll let you guys know. That's when I found that you were over at the fish camp there in a cabin. That's when I got in touch with you or your dad, and then he gave the phone to you, and then we were talking.
And I had what I thought was a friend. She was supposed to help me with a couple extra horses and, take them off everybody's hands, and all she was supposed to do was take them over there, and she was going to try to help sell them for me. So it's the day before Mother's Day. I love my animals. My animals are my babies. They're my life. Anybody who knows me knows I love kids, I love people, and I love my animals. Well, she had a flat tire over in Crescent City. So my first thought is my one horse had never been trailered, and they've got to pull her out of the trailer. I was petrified. So I begged everybody, please, put me in the van. So we had to get in the van. And my dad, bless his heart, when he went to put me in, I normally, because by then I couldn't move my neck, I couldn't move anything else. I normally had to just duck, just enough. Well, I forgot to duck, and when I did, I had like a pop in my neck. And we didn't think much of it. We went, saw my horses, everything was okay. And the next morning, it was Mother's Day, and we're sitting there, and my grandmother was beside my bed. And we're at Fort Gates Ferry, in one of the cabins. And my grandma was beside my bed, and she went to drop something, and my hands are curled like this, and all of a sudden my arm goes out, like a reaction. And I'm like, my dad and I are like, oh my God, did you see that? And I'm like, yeah. So every time I went to move my hand, I had to think about it. It wasn't just a reaction, I had to think about it. So everyone's like, oh, you're moving, you're talking, you're doing great. But nobody sees the struggle I had to go through. I didn't just walk one day. I had to struggle and think to move my hands. They used to tape my hands to boards to keep them from curling up when we got them straightened out. But we would sit there, and when I could finally move my arms, I'm like, okay, this is awesome. So Brooks, they taught me how to use the computer using this little thing in my mouth. So I'm using this stick in my mouth to answer phones and talk to people, and I mean, you don't have to move to do that. And I'm grabbing a phone like this, and I got this like a motorized little bicycle for $100 and some. I got that, and I bought these leg things, the leg lifts. So at night, instead of sleeping, I would sit there and I would lean my body down, because I could only move my body this much. I would lean it down just enough to hook my arm like this into the straps, and I would pull my leg up, and then I would push it down, and I'd pull it up and push it down. I never stopped trying to come back. I mean, I could have gave up, but I didn't. I knew there was something wrong, and I knew if I fought and fought and fought, I was at least if I couldn't move, I didn't stop.
So they didn't give you any referrals to any other doctors, or say,
Nothing.
pretty much push you out the door. This is it. Good luck.
Yeah, they didn't. They gave me physical therapy and said that, it's all in my head. And, everybody around me believed it. Nobody gave me the time of day. They're just like, it's, you don't try. You're not even trying. And I'm sitting here like, what part of moving my body and trying to move what I can move do you not understand? I'm doing everything I can. And so I finally got to the point where, I couldn't take the stress anymore. I didn't want to be sitting out there alone anymore on the ferry. And it wasn't nothing to do with my family. It wasn't nothing to do with anybody around me. But it's not me. I need to be around my home. I need to be around my animals. I need to know they're okay. I know things are okay. So I talked to Travis, and he's living next door to my house. And I talked to Travis, and I was like, can you just come check on me so I could please come home? I was like, I'm not asking you to do anything. Just come check on me a couple times a day so that if I need anything, that I've got somebody. I was like, I can call the phone if I need anything. And, bless your heart, you were like, yeah, I'll come check on you. So I'm like, oh, thank God. I
didn't know what I was getting into.
my dad's like, okay. So I moved home, and then it was, oh my goodness, within a couple months, my health just took a horrible turn for the worse. And Travis took me. I kept having my sugars kept dropping. I was in and out of the hospital with problems. And
Well, before all that happened, Tammy had come over. We were visiting and hanging out and stuff, and then I'd been talking to Angie on the phone, and all of a sudden the phone went dead. So I went next door to check on her, and then as I got next door, I noticed that, door's locked or whatever. I've got to kick the bottom of the door to get it open. So I got the door open, go in there, and she was blue as a shirt I've got on. Started doing CPR while Tammy went outside. We live in a rural area, so the signal's not very good on our cell phones and stuff. So Tammy goes outside calling 911 while I'm still doing compressions on her and stuff. And the ambulance shows up. And then they cart her off. But luckily, they got her back.
You can't get rid of me. But we went to the doctor, and he said that I was having some problems in my neck and head. And like I said, I still have migraines to this day. And he's like, well, why don't we do an MRI? Now, a doctor is the only one who can order you an MRI. Everybody knows that. I went to the MRI, and they laid me on the bed, and while I'm doing my MRI, I had my very first seizure. I had blood it was like a faucet. Blood just started pouring out of my nose.
Yeah, just let me add in here that I was running you over there, so I know these stories are true.
Travis was with me that day. And they got me all cleaned up, and they're like, well, normally we would send you to the hospital, but, the doctor's already doing the test that you're going to get at the hospital. So, he said it's okay for you to go home. I was like, okay, so we went home. Well, it's about an hour and a half drive. We got about 8 minutes from my house, and Travis is with me, and the doctor's office calls. And I put it on speakerphone, and they're like, Miss Wright, are you sitting down? And I said, yeah. I said, we haven't got home yet. He said, is there any way you can stay with somebody so you're not alone? I'm like, okay. I'm looking at Travis, and I'm like, okay. And he's like, well, yeah, that's fine. I was like, okay. So I was like, so what's going on? They're like, well, Miss Wright, I'm sorry. He's like, I should have looked at the scan sooner. He says you have an aneurysm. He's like, it's outside of your skull, like a hemorrhage. He's like, I'm so sorry. If I'd have checked. Now, that in July, I had an MRI done. And this is now, what, August, Travis?
Correct.
Right. So I'd had one done in July because of the migraines and stuff. And they're like, he's like, oh, I am so sorry. He's like, I should have checked that previous one. You have an aneurysm. He's like, it's at the point of rupturing. You can't. He's like, can you stay up? He's like, I don't want to put you back in the hospital. It's too far a drive. It's too dangerous. Okay, is there any way you could just sit up for 2 days? Because I don't want you doing anything. I was like, oh, okay. So,
yeah, in the conversation, he said, I don't want you sleeping or anything.
Yeah, no sleeping, no nothing. I'm just, for 2 days, I've got to sit up because they don't want the way it was setting, the brain hemorrhage, the blood. They didn't want it to put any pressure anywhere. I was like, well, okay. So we did it for a couple days, and we're checking my blood pressures, we're checking my sugars, and because as a non-diabetic, for over a year, my sugar would bottom out on me. It just, out of the clear blue, I would go down to 0. And Travis can tell you several times he came to my house and found me, on the floor, not moving. And I think I died, 3 times, Travis, altogether with my sugars?
Yeah, 3 different times I went over there before I finally moved her into my house.
Yeah.
And started taking care of it. And Tammy was there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You remember that, don't you, Tammy?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
They found me, but the thing is that there's no study of a non-diabetic taking diabetic medicine. So, of course, we're checking my sugars, making sure that everything's okay. And the Brain Institute calls from Shands, and I'm like, okay, I can't remember the doctor's name now. I've got a lot of memory loss problems from certain areas of my life, but these things stick out in my head. And he's like, okay, Ms. Wright, I reviewed your results. We're going to get you in to be seen. He said, is there anything we can do? I was like, okay. So they referred me over to Mayo Clinic, and I go to see a Dr. Brown at Mayo Clinic. Well, Travis was with me the day I went to Mayo Clinic. When I get to Mayo Clinic, the first thing they see is this paper that says Baker Act. Now, before they seen the Baker Act, they had, probably 10 tests lined up, Travis, they were going to do for me?
Correct.
We're like, okay, we're going to do the scan from here down. I don't know anybody's done it. They've got all these things that can possibly cause what's going on with me. And all of a sudden, the one girl leans over and she's like, hey, Doc, look. And it said Baker Act across the screen. And she says, well, I'm sorry. Cancel the test. There's nothing we can do to help you. Travis can tell you how you handled that one. So.
Yeah, I wasn't very nice about it.
Yeah.
See, the whole time before this, a bunch of stuff led up to this. And the one thing that having a little brother that's mentally handicapped and knowing a few people that have been schizophrenic and being a writer for close to 40 years, I've learned that over time, if you go and ask somebody that's crazy or psychosomatic or mentally handicapped, down, they all know that they have issues. And I asked my little brother, I said, do you know you're mentally handicapped? And he goes, I'm 3 sandwiches short of an elevator. Whatever that means, I don't know to this day, but I love him to death. But I asked her, and because they were getting ready to put her in a nursing home, the doctors and everything are saying, she's crazy, either put her in a nut ward, psych ward, whatever you want to call it, or just, there's nothing wrong with it. It's all in her mind. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I'd already asked her the question, and I told her, if there's something really wrong with you, don't put egg on my face, but if there's something really wrong with you, then I'll do my best to get you as much help as I can. I don't have to do anything but make a few phone calls and tell a few doctors off. You're the one that has to live with it.
And I looked you in the eyes when you asked me, because I was like, oh my God, somebody is finally asking me, somebody's finally giving me a chance to say, hey, there's something seriously wrong. I'm not crazy. And you said, okay, well, let's fight. Well, that was about December when that happened. And January, I started throwing up. It was just back to back. Everything I touched, everything I ate, I was throwing up. I even threw up on you a couple times. But it's got to the point where I would, even if I took a sip of water, I was throwing up for 45 minutes. So now I'm in the hospital from January to February. And it's constant every 3 days. I was getting so dehydrated from throwing up, I'm having to have, IV line, get fluids put in me. And when we went in what was it, February, Travis, you had the paper in front of you. When we went in February, Travis told him, he's like, listen, they said, well, she might have pancreatitis, she might have this. And they said, Travis goes, well, can you do me a favor? He says, I'll pay for it out of my pocket. He says, can you please do a test from her shoulders down? And the lady, the doctor says, well, I really don't see a need to it. He says, no, just please humor me. I'll pay for it out of my
because
pocket.
All the other ones in the reports I had read, and this was on February 13th, 2016, all the other, the couple of doctors that when they did the MRIs and stuff, they kept saying, well, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. And when we got over to the one medical center, which is not a hospital, it's here in Putnam County, but I'd ask a Dr. Dare if she could go in. Great doctor, love her to death. But I asked her, can you just mess with me here a little bit. Just x-ray her from the neck down, to her butt. Just in there and see if there's anything wrong, or legs. She goes, well, I tell you what, we'll go ahead and do the whole thing. And at that point,
that's when they came back in, and she says, oh my God, you have 2 tumors next to your spinal cord. Now we have some answers. So we go back in, I get
which is a lot of the reason for the paralysis.
We got to back up for a second on that, because in between December and this date, my doctor, like I said, we were referred over to Mayo Clinic for the aneurysm. And when I went to see that Dr. Brown that I had talked about at the Mayo Clinic, he said, he asked me, he's like, he's like, where's your paperwork? I said, well, I don't have anything. He's like, well, can you get things? I said, well, yeah. And he says, well, what's your doctor's name that ordered it? So I told him the doctor's name, and out of kindness, I'm not going to say the doctor's name, but I told him the doctor's name, and he called the doctor, and Travis can tell you exactly, because he called Travis out of the room, because of course at this point I'm still the crazy person. And what did they tell you, Travis?
Oh, which visit was that?
Dr. Brown, about the MRI, saying that it was in my head, that the doctor had not ordered.
Oh, yes. I was just reading your notes here, because it says that in the one from the medical center there, it says that she has 2 lesions that measure approximately 1.8 centimeters, and the other one is 1.7 centimeters. So that's the 2 that were on her spinal cord.
That was
when we got there for the MRI, they were going to do that up in Jacksonville, and the doctor comes in and says, I told her, he said, well, we can only do a couple of MRIs. You said that she already had one done, but I called over there, and the doctor said he never ordered an MRI. So we're not going to do anything. And I'm like, you're kidding me. I didn't imagine it. I'm not labeled psychosomatic here. So, you are you sure you got the right doctor? He said, yes, the doctor. This is the number you gave me. And he called him again right there in front of me. And the doctor said, look, damn it, I never ordered an MRI for her. And I said, look, damn it, you did. I'll go home and get the paperwork. So I drove all the way back from Jacksonville, all the way to the house, got the paperwork, faxed it up to the doctor. And then he's like, hey, I need to see you guys tomorrow. Then we went back up there, and he got on the phone. He wasn't very nice either, because he called him a lying son of a bitch and wanted to know why he had lied to him about ordering MRI. And he goes, oh, I guess I must have just forgotten. Now, at the same time, that same doctor that ordered the MRI on the way back, just to back up a little bit here, they had her on some medications and stuff. And then all of a sudden, he cut every medication. They had you on one for...
I had propanolol for my heart. I had thyroid medication because I was getting goiter because everything was out of whack from the glyburide. They had me on stomach meds. There was several medications that I was on.
And on heart medication. Mm-hmm. And then he just cut all the medications at one time.
He just completely just walked away from me. No explanation, no nothing. Wouldn't return my calls. Wouldn't make an appointment for me. So that's why I ended up in the hospital, because I had an absolutely new doctor. And I ended up, when we got this first study done in February, when we found the thing, she said, you need to see a doctor. Well, Travis had a doctor, and bless his heart, his name was Dr. Hernandez. I love him dearly, and I'm sorry he left, because he was at Azalea Health in Willacca. And Dr. Hernandez, he called up and he ordered me another MRI and sent me over to the radiology center in Putnam County. And when I'm sitting there doing the test, and Travis had to take me to all these, and when I was doing the test, they came into the room and they said, well, how long have you been doing chemo? I haven't been doing chemo. I was like, I already knew about a tumor. I was like, okay, it's no big deal. I didn't think too much of it. And he says, well, when did you have back surgery? I says, I've never had back surgery. He's like, are you sure you've never had back surgery? I says, yeah, I've never had back surgery. So we go through, and he takes me out, and he says, well, the doctor's going to have to...
No, before you came out, the two doctors, I'm out in the hallway, and the two doctors walk out, and the one said, I think I just screwed up. I think I just, messed up really bad. He goes, the other doctor says, why? He says, because this woman evidently has cancer. He said it's, I've got the notes right here from that place, and it says beginning at the T4 level and extending down to at least the L2. And then it goes on to say that the lesions extend along the ribs at several levels. And then it says, I've seen these lesions before in the area scan. The lesions are rather suspicious of neurofibromatosis. So at that point is when you actually got your first diagnosis.
Right. And I came back to Dr. Hernandez, and he told his secretary, he says, cancel all the appointments for the rest of the day. And he walked in, and he pulled his chair up next to me. And again, Travis is my healthcare surrogate, so he takes care of me. And we're sitting there, and he puts his hand on my leg, and he says, I don't know how to tell you this, but you have cancer. And he says, you've got neurofibromatosis. And a lot of people who hear about neurofibromatosis, there are two types. There are cancerous and non-cancerous. So you'll always get an argument. But mine is, from what I've been told, it's the cancerous form. And so we're sitting there, and he's like, I don't know anything about this disease. He's like, but I'm going to spend the rest of the weekend, because it was a Friday, I'm going to spend the rest of the weekend, learning everything I can about it. He says, are you okay? And you're just, okay, I don't know what this disease is at this point. And I'm like, okay. So I'm like, yeah. He's like, now I need to know, do you want to fight, or what do you want me to do? He's like, if you're going to fight, I'll fight with you. And I'm like, well, of course I'm going to fight. And so he's like, okay, well, we're going to order some tests to see exactly what's going on. He's like, we're going to try to refer you elsewhere. Well, we went, and Travis has the next report. They did one more scan to see, because they had to have a secondary. With neurofibromatosis, it's very rare. They don't know much about neurofibromatosis, but it's becoming more prominent that people, I can't remember the numbers. If you want to know the numbers. According
to the lady I talked to today at the what was her name, Kathy?
That was Deb.
Or Debbie. one, and and I was thinking before I ever heard about neurofibromatosis, which I couldn't even pronounce it when the doctor said it, still have problems with it. But according to them, 1 in every 23 to 2,500, right around 3,000, every baby that's born within 1 to 3,000 will have neurofibromatosis. And I didn't know it was that rare. It happens more than cystic fibrosis and a lot of other stuff that we get.
But we went to the next study, and Travis can say again, and the notes came up. They found even more of the. They were all along my ribs. They were on my spinal cord. They found all kinds of neurofibromas. Well, like I said, I started going to the hospital.
Well, let me stop you right there. What neurofibromatosis does is it attacks the nerve endings, and neurofibromatosis doesn't care if you're Hispanic, if you're black, if you're white. It doesn't care what gender you are. When it attacks, it attacks. And these, they look like white pockets. And what they are is they're not a cancer, but they're a nasty little cell, and it attacks the end of the nerve endings, which will cause paralysis. Let me pop up some of the things, Chris. Put up a couple. Now, before we put these up, I'm going to warn you guys that these pictures, if you don't, they're disturbing. I'll leave it at that. So you might want to close your eyes for 10 or 15 seconds. Go ahead and put that one up, Chris.
The one I'm on?
Right. This is what neurofibromatosis looks like when it attacks the outside of the body. And go to the next one.
Okay.
It can also cause your eyeball to pop out, dislocate joints, all kinds of stuff. Next one.
It can also cause not diabetes, but it can cause sugar levels to be crazy. It can cause problems. It's because it attacks nerve endings. It can cause all kinds of crazy things in your body.
Pop that one on, Chris. And if you look right where the little marks are at, you'll see that those are all the nerve endings that they're pointing to. Those white masses that you see on the one on the right, those little dots all along the vertebrae are all neurofibromatosis. Mm-hmm. All along through, and these are actual images, I believe. Aren't these images of you?
No, mine are going to be in the next one that he shows.
Okay, go ahead and put the ones up. This is typically what you see. I've got a better picture of it, and that's actually
the day we got this picture.
That one's it.
We went into the doctor's office, and you'll go see my name's on there. We went to the doctor's office, and he says, "Here, where's your phone?" He says, "Anybody ever calls you crazy again, I want you to show them this picture." He says, "Every one of these little white dots is neurofibromatosis." He says, you've got it. He says, "Don't you ever have anybody doubt you again."
All the white dots that you see on those pictures, mm-hmm. Those are all the NF1 or neurofibromatosis. Over on the other side too. Right through there. All down through there. Slide over to the next frame. All those white dots you see on there, as well as the white dots going up in the back between the skin and the vertebrae. Those are all neurofibromatosis.
And he told me, he says, all of your nerve roots are covered with neurofibromas. All of them. So now we have, a definition. But I got that in September, I want to say the 26th or 29th of September. But between that actual picture and when I started having the throwing up episodes, we went through all kinds of chaos. Every time I'd go to the hospital to try to see a doctor because I was throwing up and everything, I went through, it was in my head. Are you sure you're throwing up? Are you sure it's not the flu? And Travis can tell you, I showed them my neurofibromatosis thing because everybody wants to diagnose why you can't walk. They don't care
Let's back up before that point. When you went over to the one medical center, I remember a doctor saying that the doctor that had cut her off on the stuff, when the other doctors got her prescriptions and then started them back again, there was one drug that was Prilosec. And after doing some research and stuff, propranolol, I'm sorry. The propranolol, a lot of times it'll cause bleeding and stuff, and also drop your insulin levels in your body. Well, she would be sitting there and having seizures, and her insulin levels would go from 120 down to 3 or 4. So it was rushing her to the hospital. Well, when we got over to the hospital, the one doctor, when he took her into the room, he comes out and he goes, "Are you shooting her up with insulin?" And I'm like, "What? Why would I be shooting her up with insulin?" He goes, "Well, that's the only thing that would cause this." And I'm like, "No, I don't think so. I don't shoot her." Well, she's shooting up insulin. And she's trying to make herself a diabetic because she's crazy. I read her report. She's nuts. And I'm like, "You're nuts," So after I was doing some research on it, I found out that that particular drug will cause, and in fact, make your blood sugars drop. So when I bring this up to the doctor, he's like, "I'm the doctor, you're not." And he goes, "Don't try to play God with me." And I said, "You know what, the one thing about you, between you and God, is God never said he was a doctor." And then he started, at this point, wanting to fist fight me. And I'm like, "Well, let's take it out, let's take it outside." The cops came and everything, and he's wanting to Baker Act to her again. This is a different doctor, but they're wanting to put her in the nut ward again. And I'm like, "No, she's not going there. I'll take her out of the hospital right now." So from there, we went over to, we're back up to Jacksonville.
Well, we've had several episodes where we were in the hospital. Lots of doctors. Every time I went to a doctor, I'd show them my paper because, like I said, everybody's trying to diagnose why you can't move. I'd show them the neurofibromatosis, and I'd get doctors right up in my nose that would go, "You don't have neurofibromatosis. Who told you have neurofibromatosis? People with neurofibromatosis have it on the outside. You can see I've got a tumor here. I've got another tumor here. I've got tumors on parts of my body. I've got them on my feet." And so after several hospital stays, we ended up where Travis is talking about. And I ended up at the hospital before he took me out that day. We went to the hospital the night before. I was sick, couldn't move. My head was throbbing. Lots of pain. I mean, I was screaming. And when you can't talk, because every time I had seizures, Travis, it would last sometimes, 3-4 days? 5 days. I mean, sometimes it last a couple hours. And every time it would come back, it was such a sharp pain that I would always end up screaming out. And so we're sitting there, and Travis left me at the hospital the night before, explained to them that I couldn't talk, and I'm begging him, "Please don't go." But he had to come back. He has children. He has to take care of his kids. And I understand that. It's just when you can't talk, you're petrified. So I wrote down on the paper, and he told me, "Listen," he's like, "I told him you can't talk. I told him to read the paperwork." Well, the next day when they changed shifts, a nurse walks in my room, and she asked me something about, "Why didn't you eat your tray?" And I wrote down, it's like, I need my meds first, because the stomach pill, unless I take my stomach pill, I really can't eat it. The greasy food makes me sick. Well, I show it to her, and she says, "Oh, what, you're not going to talk to me?" I was like, I wrote down I can't talk, and I still have all the papers.
No, before I left there, though, I had taken a dry eraser and had written on the dry eraser board there that if she becomes unresponsive, it's not because she's crazy, it's because she can't communicate to her. Ask her once for yes, twice for no's, and she'll blink her eyes.
And it was all on the board.
And it was right there in front of the screen. Okay, go ahead.
Well, she looks at me and she says, "Well, I'm not going to deal with that." So then you have a psychiatrist comes in and she says, "Well, there's no medical reason you can't talk." And I wrote down, "This happens every time I have a seizure." And she's like, "I'm not going to read that. I don't have time for it. Unless you're going to talk to me, I'm not going to take the time to read that." And I wrote down, "I can't." Well, they got tired of me moving my hands and writing and tied me to the bed. Now, I can't move. I can't do anything. And they said, "Well, if you want us to untie you," and this is in a regular hospital room, "if you want us to untie you, then you need to speak up and let us know." And I'm like, what am I going to do? They got those orange strappy things for a tourniquet, and they've got me tied to the bed. Now, I can't make a phone call because in the hospital, when you're not in the county, you got to call the operator and have the operator make the call. So
now, at this point, you can move your hands and
at
stuff.
At this point, yeah, I can move my hands. I can move my body parts by now. That slowly came back, but I fought, and I'm still fighting. I still fall. I mean, if I get tired and I'm not thinking, I can still fall. It's like being a bobblehead. The only way you can move is to think constantly. And when you stop thinking and you're tired, you get klutzy. You fall, you drop things. But I was in the hospital, and the nurse call button was beside my hand, and I would bump it. And they're like, Miss Wright, can we help you? And I'm trying to tap on the thing so they know I'm there. And she goes, Miss Wright, unless you talk to us, we're not coming in there. So I would hit it again, and they would do the same thing. Well, finally, I could hear them talking to Travis on the phone out there. And I wrote big letters, A-M-A. I wanted out of that hospital. I stretched everything. I mean, I ended up with bruises on my wrist because I pulled so hard to try to write that down that I wanted the hospital. And they looked at me and they're like, well, you don't need to be leaving the hospital. You're crazy. You're incompetent. So I did not know at that time I had a brain infection. Nobody has informed me of that. Travis came that day. He had no idea. They called him and said that I was refusing to cooperate. Absolutely refusing.
No, they didn't call me. You text me.
I didn't have a text that day, Travis. That was
Or-
my phone.
Oh, yeah, that's
wasn't
right.
with
The
me.
one nurse
I
that-
I had the nurse. I wrote down, please call.
That's right, my
I
bad.
called you, and you were on the phone with Tammy, and they're like, "Hello, is somebody there?" When it hung up, and I got her attention again by pounding on the bed with my hand, and she called again, and you called, and you answered, and you would say, "Hello, is somebody there?" And I'd hit one, just like a real long sound, and you're like, "Is that you?" And I hit one again, so yeah, that's me. Well, you were on your way to the hospital, and by the time you got into the hospital room, Travis, the doctor was looking me in the nose, and they untied me, so they knew he had been coming. They untied me, and the doctor gets in my nose. Now, Travis is standing up against the wall, and Travis.
Well,
is my
what
healthcare
happened was
person.
when I walked in the room, there was another lady in the other bed, and the doctors and them just automatically assumed that, hey, she's there to visit him. They pulled back the curtains, and I kind of stepped over to the side, and then the doctor goes, I'm just not going to deal with her. Let's Baker act her. Let's put her upstairs.
And I couldn't talk, and I'm going like that. I'm just like, oh my gosh.
When I looked at you, you had the tears rolling out of your eyes. You were like, oh, God, not again.
Not again.
And at that point, I said, I stepped up there and I told the doctor, I said, can you not read the dry eraser board? And he goes, oh, well, what do you mean she can't talk? And I said, read it. Read exactly what it says to me. And then he then says, well, we're just, I don't know. I'm not going to deal with this, and walked out of the room. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to take her out of the hospital right now, and I'm going to run her back up to Jacksonville.
So, and when I got out of that hospital, he told me, he looked me in the face, he says, you do realize if you leave, you might die. And I'm thinking, they're just a scare tactic at this point, because they just threatened to Baker at me. They gets in my nose and says I'm incompetent. So I have no idea I have anything more serious going on. And this is the report, Travis, you can read to them, about what the doctor said when I left Flagler. Now, nobody told me I had anything going on. They just said that they wanted to keep me. And then when you read the report, we got home that night. Just back up. We got home that night, and we went and saw my doctor the next morning. I had like 100 and some fever, Travis. It was like 104 fever. The
Correct.
doctor was giving me popsicles to cool me down, and took me up that night. He's like, well, you need to go to Shands. Well, Travis, he took me home to get something to eat so my sugar wouldn't drop, because it's a long drive to Jacksonville. It's like an hour and a half drive. So he's like, okay, let's get something to eat. He went to get gas. When he came back, by that time, I was screaming. My head hurt so bad, I couldn't talk. I couldn't do anything. It was like, I don't know, it was like a train was running over top of your head. At the same time, these fireworks are going off and all these explosions. And all I can do is look at him with tears in my eyes, and I'm screaming. And he put me in the car, and he was taking me to all the way to Mayo Clinic. And I mean, the heat was on my head, anything hot, just, if you moved your head this much, this much, it was, you just...
Is that when you had all the bleeding?
No, that was the brain infection. The bleeding was separate. But it was unbelievable, the pain in my head. And when you put the heater on, I'm by now he's got a text, he's giving me his tablet, because I had broke my phone. I dropped it to the hospital and busted the phone. But I'm texting on there as like, please heat down, hurts, and he turned the heat down. But we got to the hospital, and come to find out, I had, what's this, Klebsiella pneumonia septicemia. I had basically, by the time they got done with my diagnosis, I had a brain infection that nobody had told me about, but we got it cleared up, and I've got all the paperwork proving it. But Then we ended up, because of all the other meds and everything else getting regulated, we ended up with nosebleeds. I ended up with nosebleeds so bad I could just be sitting here talking to you, and all of a sudden my nose was like a faucet. It would just turn on and pour.
Yeah, I've got one of
During
those
seizures,
pictures.
it got worse, and I had with the aneurysm, I had blood that would come out of my eyes, and
Well, here's when you have one of your nosebleeds. Go to the next one, Krista, to the right.
This one?
That one. I got to warn you guys, these are pretty graphic, so if you don't want to watch them, I mean, there's blood.
this night that we went to the hospital,
This is blood that was coming out of her nose and her mouth and everything else. Messed up another good T-shirt of mine, but
he took
we're
his shirt
good.
off his back.
Neurofibromatosis place gave me a T-shirt to wear, so I'm good.
Yeah. So when I went to the hospital that night, they pulled Travis out of the room
Pull that one down.
and tried to say that I was crazy, that I had done that to myself. So they took, what was it, Travis? They did these tubes up my nose. And they came back out and they're like, oh, we can't find any way. Because they thought maybe I had scratched my nose and was causing it. And they're like, oh,
Well,
we
the
can't
doctor
find
came
anything.
out and said that he goes, we think she's injuring herself. And I said, no, I don't think so. I mean, she's at my house 24/7. I see her, you know, I've taken long vacation here to make sure that, you know, she's okay. And he goes, well, I think what she's doing is she's taking her finger and shoving it up in her nose and tearing the lining out in her nose, causing her to bleed so bad. And I said, but I don't think so. So he goes, before we Baker Act her another time, we're going to examine the inside of her nose. Do you have any problem with that? I said, no, go ahead. You know, I haven't seen her pick her nose to this day. So go ahead. So they start doing all these tests, shoving these scopes up her nose, looking there, looking inside of her mouth, looking everywhere to find out where she might have blood coming from. Couldn't find anything.
But
Okay.
yeah, but it was hard because I would sit there and I mean I'm reaching out, we can't do anything, and we get a doctor's report from that visit that said it wasn't that one, it was another one, but basically they were putting down that the patient's refusing to cooperate, the patient's hurting herself, even after we're getting diagnoses and we have evidence that I have something going on. Instead of finding me doctors, I would call doctors and say, hey, listen, I've got neurofibromatosis, you know, and I'm calling Mayo Clinic. I said, can you help me? And Mayo says, well, are you sure it's not in your head? Can you show us evidence before we come in and take you? You know, you have been Baker acted. I'm like, excuse me? I was like, I've got all the evidence. Well, man, we only take people that truly have problems.
No, this is how long? About a year?
About a year
From the
afterwards.
time you
It
went to
took
Shands?
a year. It took me months to be able to get to a doctor, and I finally found with the NF network. I called them and I called some other places, and because of the Deb at the NF network, I was able to find Dr. Newton down in Orlando at the he's my neuro-oncologist at the Orlando hospital. But you know, it's been a long road. Travis can read all these. It's every time I have a seizure, it says, you know, they talk about the patient hasn't been able to walk for 5 days. I attempted to speak with the patient. She refused to respond to her body. With the nurse present, she reluctantly started moving her body. However, she did not move her fingers. Being unable and unwilling to talk, she typed messages to me on her phone using her wrist. She says that the reason she is like this is because we have stopped IV fluids. This is when they had taken me off. So we will resume the IV fluids, though patient can hydrate orally and is not dehydrated. I do understand the patient has experienced prolonged bereavement and has seen at least 2 psychiatrists. Which when I did see the psychiatrist, both of them said, we see nothing wrong with you. But because you have been Baker acted, you have spoken with psychiatrists. Here we go. It says, patient's caretaker, Travis, was contacted by myself. I explained what I have witnessed firsthand. He was able to provide some insight as well. I told them that he will treat her bacteremia, that's where I had the infection, any problems that arise. It was difficult to assess the patient as she is unwilling or unable to communicate. I could consult psychiatry and meet with her needs anyway. Patient has been Baker acted previously. So, and this was all the way, now this happened in 2015. We got our first diagnosis in February of 2016. And August of 2017, they're still bringing up the Baker Act and everything else. Every time we have gone, and even to this day, last week, I went into a doctor, and I have internal jugular vein thrombosis. Inside of my neck and inside my subclavian, right about here, I have a blood clot. I'm on heparin every day for it. I take several meds. But we have to have it checked to make sure it's not moving, because I get, of course it's in my head, right about an hour before I take my shots, I'll get a real sharp pain right here. All of a sudden my vision goes out of my eye. I can't see. I start getting, Travis can ask you, it's almost like I space out. Like, I know something's going on, but it takes me a long time to realize I need my shot. It's just, and then by the time I get my shot, within 20-30 minutes I come back. But we went to the doctor the other day, and I'm sitting in the office, and of course you have the what are they, the one that comes in, she's not the doctor, she's the
Nurse practitioner.
Nurse practitioner. The nurse practitioner walked in, and I explained to her everything and told her what was going on, and of course she's like, okay, so I'll go tell the doctor, and the doctor will come in and talk to you. So the doctor walks in, and he says, what can I do for you? And I was like, I started laughing, and I forgot to tell him about that story the previous time that happened to me. But I'm sitting there looking at him, and I said, Doc, I explained to him I'm having the problems in my neck and things like that, and he says, well, what could cause that? And I said, well, I don't know. I said, I have neurofibromatosis, and he says, is that von Richtling's disease? And I says, I don't know. I think so. I wasn't sure what von Richtling's disease was. I'm expecting the doctor to know what he's talking about. So I go on, and we're talking, and he says, well, those are slow-growing tumors. So I'm thinking, okay, yeah, he does know what I'm talking about, neurofibromatosis, that grows these tumors on you and inside of you. And
now this doctor's connected with Shands as well?
He's connected to Shands as well.
Okay.
And so when I see him, he says, he goes over, and he's talking about how most people that have my problem, they can end up on kidney dialysis and things like that. And he says, yours isn't that bad. He said, but I think your problems are all asymptomatic. And I'm like, whoa. I was like, my book, I carry it everywhere with me, because every time I go to a doctor, I have to go through a doctor saying I'm crazy. Every time I go to a doctor. The book's about this thick, and it has the main documents in it. And I said, right there's all my evidence. I have neurofibromatosis. He says, well, has anybody in your family had it? And I was like, no. He says, well, then you shouldn't have it. I was like, sir, I had a pharmacy scrap my meds. I don't know if that affected it or what. I have no idea. I just know I have it. I've got this spontaneous mutation in my body. I went from being healthy all of my life to one day I was driving and I couldn't move. I don't know why. I said, all I know is all we have found is I've got tumors all along my spinal cord. I've got them in my abdomen. I've got them everywhere. I said, a couple weeks ago they just found 2 on my lungs. I've got them on my liver. I've got them, in my brain. I've got them
Now,
everywhere.
how many, I know the answer to this, but how many tumors do you have in your brain right now?
Okay, I was told that I have 17 tumors in my brain. They are not big enough to worry about, but I have 17 tumors in my brain.
And in your body?
In my body, that they have calculated, that they have estimated to be about 200 in my body, that pressing on things. So there's days that if I move just right, I can't move at all. And Tammy's been here at the house with us some days, and I was petrified. We were sitting there one night, Tammy was with us, and my leg was tapping to the music. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. All of a sudden, it went all the way up my legs, into my neck, and I was petrified. All I could think of is, here we go again. This is it. I'm not going to be able to move or talk ever again. And it'll happen off and on. And that one lasted, what, Tammy? About 20 minutes? Maybe longer?
Yeah, at least.
Oh, my God.
If
And
not longer.
Tammy
Yeah.
was holding my hand. I was petrified. I was so scared. I'm like, I can't go
I
through
know.
this
It was
again.
very scary.
Now, at this point, the only thing that can be done is she has to take a shot in the arm and a shot in the stomach.
Yeah, for the headaches and stuff. Because of, everybody's like, well, why don't you do chemo? Why don't you get surgery? Because there's so many. And neurofibromatosis, the tumors just keep growing. There's a gene in your body that, everybody has a gene that suppresses tumors. And with neurofibromatosis, we don't have that gene. That gene is missing in our body. So tumors just go crazy in our bodies. Well, because of where the tumors are, and the fact that they're on the nerves and so close to the spinal cord, they do not want to do surgery on me, because it's too dangerous. So now we're looking at chemo, to do chemo, but the problem again with chemo, with neurofibromatosis, if you have good ones or bad ones, it can end up, everything can go haywire crazy and turn it worse. So you're left with you're darned if you do, you're darned if you don't. So it's a really hard decision to make, but the problem is now, even though I can move around, something is growing or something is moving that we're getting ready to have to do some more tests. my legs are starting to drag again. I'm having a lot of trouble dropping things, and so there's something going on, and I don't want to end up back with a problem. But Travis has in front of him where it shows I have them all along the ribs, everywhere. I have so many in my body, but I don't know. But the reason I laughed about earlier is I forgot to tell him, Travis, remember the day you went with me, and this happened a couple times. A friend of mine, Laura, was another one that was with me. But we were at the doctor's office. Again, another one to check a blood clot in my neck. And I walk in, and the doctor says, "Oh, what are you here for?" This is why it's so funny, because I told this doctor, I said, I'm having a lot of issues. I said, I'm having the same pain I'm having now. There's pain in my neck. And I said, it keeps shooting up into my eye. He says, well, what do you want me to do about it? I'm like, well, you're the doctor. Can't we do some tests? And so they kind of put me off. They're like, well, we'll have you put a Holter monitor on. We'll do all this in a couple weeks. Well, what was it? Less than a week later, Travis, I was in the hospital. The blood clots had built blood clots on top of them, and they were going into my brain.
Right, and at one point they actually had
that was the next one. Yeah.
the PIC lines.
Yeah, that's when they were doing the PIC lines and everything else. But
And what happened was she started getting dehydrated because with the syncope and the gastroparesis and stuff and the medications they had her on, she wasn't able to hold any food down. It was like capfuls of water at a time. And if she ate anything, it would have to be an eighth of a teaspoon, less than a gram at a time. So at this point, she's not getting any nutrients in her body and stuff. It's like, boom, back to the hospital. They're saying she's dehydrated. What we're going to have to do is put a PIC line in her, which they did put a PIC line in her. And that had its own complications.
Boy, did it.
The one night that I took her to the hospital, she wasn't feeling good. The PIC line was backing up. It wouldn't take any the heparin to clear it out. It wouldn't take any of the heparin in it. And at this point, she's starting to have blood clots and stuff that were seeping out of her eyeball. Let's put that one up, Chris. Again, these are graphic pictures.
Is it this one?
Yeah. She would just start bleeding from the eyes and just be laying there. And if you look, there's no blood coming out of her nose or anything else. It's just coming out of her.
you could see also, if you look, my eye is swollen on that side.
Yeah, if you look right up at the very top of the eye, you'll see where it's like pushing out. So the blood's leaking out of her, between her skull and the brain sac. And it's just pouring out. When I rolled her head over, if you look at the bottom of the pillow, you'll see where it's completely covered in blood. But you won't see any connection of blood from her nose to her mouth. Okay, go ahead and pull the next one up.
Okay, hold on.
You'll have to excuse us for kind of jumping around, because I have a lot of problems thinking, but it's anybody who tells the story are like, oh yeah, I forgot that, but it's
Straight up.
It's been such a long battle. I just really want to share my story to help others.
When she went to the bathroom, of course I'm not going in the bathroom with her. I kind of helped carry her in there, and then after I put a little bell in there for a cowbell for my drum set, and like, if you have problems, ring this. So she rang it. I come in there, and this is how I find her. Now, I didn't take this picture to humiliate her or anything, but only to document,
Travis
so that when they
documented everything.
I documented everything, so that when they would say she was crazy, it's like, I don't think so. Yeah, I've never met anybody that can just make themselves bleed like this. So go ahead and take that one down, Chris. No, you got to put the one up for Lee. I know Lee's listening all the way to the far right. This is my one of my real good friends right here. Her name is Lee, and this and this picture right here. Go ahead and take that one down. And where's the one where she's in the hospital, laying in the hospital bed? No, it's the one up top left.
No,
Okay, that's another picture of. No, go ahead and click that one back on.
Yeah.
This is another picture, and she had been laying on her back with her face facing up. And when I turned her head sideways, if you look, you'll see a clot there. That was one of the blood clots that came out of her between the brain and the skull. Of course, she's crazy,
Yeah.
according to the doctors, and this stuff just doesn't happen. And
Yeah, it's
So-
all in my head, and it's
And-
and I didn't know any of that was going on. I would only wake up and find the blood. And when I was having seizures, I would have seizures sometimes for 10, 15 minutes at a time. And whenever I had a seizure, and I'm talking a whole year, people, every day I would have seizures.
take that one down.
And when we're doing this, when I would have seizures, I couldn't move or talk afterwards. It would have to slowly bring it back. But
No, at this
This one?
At this time, yeah, that's a good. At this time, she had the PICC line in her, and we went over to one of the medical centers here in Putnam County, the only one that's here, and the PICC line goes in from the vein, and then it runs up into the heart. Well, she started having some problems with it. The heparin wouldn't go through, and so I called the hospital and they said, "Bring her in. We'll check her PICC line. We'll flush it out." Well, when we got there, they couldn't flush it out. So the doctor in the ER pulls the PICC line out about a half inch or so.
a little bit more than that, about an inch.
About an inch. Well, at first he pulls that out about a half inch and pus starts oozing out of it. So then he goes ahead and pulls it on out, maybe an inch more, 2 inches more, and gets it out, and he goes, "Oh man, she's got an infection in her." Starts pushing the PICC line back in her. Says, "We're going to put some antibiotics in her IV bag. She'll be fine." Well, they go ahead and put the IV, get the antibiotics, put it in an IV bag, and then 5 minutes later they come in and say, "Okay, you're discharged." Boom, out the door. I'm like, "Are you kidding me? What about, can I at least take the IV bag with the antibiotics in it?" He says, "No, our policy is we don't let any IV bags go out of here." I'm like, "Okay, what about a prescription?" "Well, she should be fine." I'm like, "Really? For 10 minutes? 10 minutes of IV and with antibiotics and she's going to be fine?" "I don't think so."
But I was
So-
already on IVs. They had me on the fluids at home at that point.
Yeah,
It was
so
24
when-
hours a day. I had a tail.
So when we get back out in my Jeep, hook the IV bag. I had to reconnect the IV bag for her because she's on fluids 24/7 at this point. So I was it the next morning, I believe. She's
See, I
she's
don't
just not
remember-
feeling good.
I don't remember
Yeah,
some of
it
this
was.
because I was so
It was the
sick
next morning.
that the infection, what had happened was I had gotten an infection. And the only thing I can remember from this point is we go from Mother's Day, it was supposed to be Mother's Day that weekend. So I can remember May 6th to the next thing I remember is July 21st. And all this happened in the middle. I was so sick that I don't remember any of it. So
So then I put her in my truck, haul butt over to Flagler. Because at this point, she's burning up. I mean, I think her temperature was, Tammy, was 104 or something.
I think it might have even been higher than that.
Yeah, and so I'm trying to get her over there, shoving ice pops, trying to get her. She's not even coherent. She's out of it completely. Get her over to the hospital over there, and as soon as they saw her, boom, they put her in quarantine. And from all the pus and everything, they said that she had gone septic and that her brain had an infection. This is the second one now. So her brain had infection in it, her whole body had infection in it. That's one of the picture I had of Lee up there before. Put it up one more time.
and the only thing I know is what
She's
I
gonna kill me
read,
for
and
this,
the
you know
doctors
it.
had to tell me that I had developed MRSA.
There she is.
And
Leave
I
that
was
one up
so
for a minute.
anemic that I had to get a blood transfusion. I was so anemic from all of it. So
If she's not watching right now, this is what she gets for messing with us. So you're what in there 6-7 days now?
see, I don't remember that time period. I've lost all that time because they said I was. A lot of people when you get septic and it messes with your brain and you get MRSA, they said that it can cause you to not know what's going on. It's kind of like women if anybody's had a very bad UTI infection, they go really loopy crazy. And
Never
that
had
can
one.
I haven't either. But they said that it can cause the women to go crazy or whoever to go crazy. That's why you got to keep those things under control. But mine, whatever had happened, they said the infection, the way it affected me, that
Go and take it now.
it somehow had messed with my brain. So whatever I had done in that period of time, they said I probably would never remember. So, and everybody's tried helping remember, but I just don't remember anything from that time. We've tried everything.
It was like a 3-month period where you were. I've forgotten. The one up on the top left, Chris. No, I'm sorry, wrong one. The one where she's in the hospital bed. I believe that's it.
Yeah.
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 This is when she's starting to come out of quarantine. Of course, they had tubes up her nose and
Yeah.
everything else.
Feeding tubes. And
Feeding her and everything else. Tubes coming out of her to go to the bathroom, which, no, not for me. Okay, so move on from this point.
so,
That just floored me. You could take that one down. It's kind of nasty.
yeah. But no, every time we go to a doctor, even with all this going on, every time we go to a doctor, we even have on a paper, Travis can tell you. Travis, read that, what that one doctor said. I went to Flagler Hospital, and I love Flagler Hospital. I still go to them. But we went to Flagler Hospital, and now because of all the blood clots and all the tumors and everything I have going on, because it took so long, the doctor at Shands did not do his job and figure out what's going on in the first place. The tumors have caused me so many problems. I have them, Travis, somewhere in there it says about the aortic artery. There's a bunch of them around my aortic arteries, causing problems, pressing on my heart. I have syncope now because of it, where my heart just goes way out of whack. And every time we go to a doctor, I'm having to fight them and tell them I have neurofibromatosis, I have this, I have that. It's a struggle. So, I don't know, Travis, I'm having a hard time.
Okay, that's all right. Take your time. We still have 33 minutes.
Talk about
Actually, I'm going to let
for
you.
a second.
I know, it's so depressing. Everybody asks
You know-
me through all of this, well, how can you smile? How do you keep smiling through everything you got going on? Your friends have gone away, and it's not that they've gone away, it's just wheelchairs are pain in the keister. Nobody wants to deal with a wheelchair. They don't know how to act around you. And I'm the same person. If you ever have somebody that's in a wheelchair becomes handicapped, that's your friend. Remember, they're the same person that they were before they were in the wheelchair and need friendship more than anything. Give them a call, just text them and say hi. Do anything. It is the loneliest feeling in the world when you are handicapped. And everyone's like, well, how can you keep smiling through all this? They've told you you're going to die. And the one night, Travis, he goes back to Louisiana and he helps some families out there that their homes were destroyed during the hurricanes a couple years ago. And he goes out there for about a week at a time, and he'll come back. Well, he had left one day, and I was in the shower, and I was looking at my hands, and I was like, I know my hands has something to do with the shower turning off, but I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't put two and two together. And I'm like, I should go. I was like, okay, I'm just tired, no big deal. So I got out of the shower, and I sat down, and I took a little bit of a nap, and I got back up, and now I'm holding the blow dryer in one hand, and I'm holding my brush in the other hand, and I'm like, okay, I've done this a million times. I can't think this out. There's something wrong. So I called a friend of mine, Laura, and Laura Sagley, if you're listening, bless your heart, thank you so much. But I talked to a friend of mine, Laura, and she could vouch for me. And Laura, she came rushing over, and by this time, I'm trying a crossword puzzle, and I'm looking, I'm like, okay, it went from words to letters. So she's like, well, why don't we go to the hospital? Well, I called Travis and told him that, yeah, we're just, you know, I always
By the
tell
way,
him
I
so.
never leave her alone unattended.
No, never, no. But the person who was taking care of me, that they had to go get some groceries, so I was there. But anyway, so they were at the dollar store, which is like a couple miles on the road. So I called Laura, and Laura came by, and she said, why don't we go to the hospital? I'm like, I don't know. She said, no, let's just go to the hospital. I was like, are you sure? And she's like, okay, because I don't like being an inconvenience on people. You know, she's got a life, she's got a family. She came, you know, for 45 minutes to come see me. So we go to Flagler Hospital, and we're sitting there, and Dr. E, everybody knows him as Dr. E. Dr. E went and did a bunch of tests, and he comes in, and he says that I was having, they were kind of like little mini, I think it was called mini seizures. There was something where my brain was doing these little things. And he says, we're going to mark you as a Xarelto fail. He said that, again, the blood clots were building blood clots on top of them, and I was pretty much done. And the next thing I know, a priest is coming in my room to read me my last rites, and we ended up the next day. I mean, I was petrified.
This was how long ago?
This was last. Okay, so this is 2018. This was last April. It was in April of last year. And so when you got on the phone with me and you said, well, I'm coming straight back. I said, no. I said, at this point, you know, there's no sense of worrying about it. If I don't make it through the night, I don't make it through the night. They got me on heparin drip, and they didn't think I was going to make it through the night. They told me, you know, If you got any last words, you better go ahead and say them. And, poor Laura, she had to get back to her family. So I'm sitting at the hospital, and I'm like, okay, how am I going to do this? I'm just like, God, I don't know what to do. And that night, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to sleep, but if I wake up alive, I'm going to fight for my life. I'm going to fight harder than I've ever fought before. I'm tired of all the doctors calling me crazy. I'm tired of being the silent one. And it's hard because if you stand up to a doctor, especially when they think you're crazy, then you get all these other doctors, well, they're a problem patient. Instead of realizing the patient knows their body best, they assume, okay, well, I haven't heard of that, that's different. And I had everything going on that we even went to one of the cancer centers, and I had to be informed of this because I don't remember, and I really truly wish I could, but I did call their office, and they had confirmed it. And they said that I had so many symptoms going on. Instead of trying to pinpoint them down, they said, well, you can't have neurofibromatosis because all these symptoms don't add up to it. But these symptoms do, but the rest of them don't. Well, instead of pinpointing what I had and trying to seclude it down to what's what, again, the cancer center said I didn't have it, and they pushed me off. And
That was the one up in Jacksonville.
that was one up in Jacksonville. That was,
Right, not the one in Orlando.
no, that was what, it started with an A.
Yeah, we don't mention
Yeah,
that. I don't want to give
mention
them any
the
free
name. I don't
press.
want to say, yeah, that one, yeah, they refused. But like I said, the problem is once you've been labeled crazy, it stays with you. I can't even get it taken off my record with everything going on. Like I said, just the other day, Travis and I went to that doctor, and I was so furious when I first walked out. It's like, I told my dad, I was like, this is what I go through. Every time I go to a doctor, it's in my head. Instead of telling me, hey, okay, well, this could be this, or I can't help you, I've got on his papers where the one doctor wrote, it's above my pay grade, I can't do it. Like I was saying, we go to Flagler Hospital, and Flagler, they said, well, you really need to be in a facility, a long-term care facility, people that can watch. You've got so much going on, and your health is so crazy, you need to be in a long-term care facility. And I came home in tears, and I was like, I don't want to be a burden on other people. I asked Travis, like, you realize what we've already been through and what it could be. It could get worse. I mean, they're talking about, because there's so many inside my body, I could end up on a bag. I could end up in the hospital for the last 6 months of my life. And so I talked to Travis, and Travis is like, hey, as long as you fight, I'll fight. And there's been days, everybody has days where you want to give up. You feel like, okay, that's it, I can't do no more. The pain's too much. I mean, the pain is excruciating every day. And I just sat out one day, and I'm just looking at the clouds, and I'm just like, okay, they told me I was what? I think I had, a couple weeks to live, that they told me, Travis.
Yeah, they've told you that a few times.
Yeah. And
Take her home, let her die. I mean, she's going to die in the next...
morphine pumps and just let her die, and I refuse. And I was sitting there, and I looked at the clouds one day, and I'm just like, okay, God, what do I do? And I felt like my story wasn't meant for me. It was meant for the world. Somebody out there is going through the same thing. They're afraid to talk, and you can't be. You've got to stand up for yourself. It's your life. And if I didn't have someone to stand up for me, I've been through it. You've got to have someone to stand up for you. You've got to tell people. You can't be afraid to talk about things like that,
Yeah.
Well, what amazes me is that how many of your so-called friends and even a newspaper had went on and then they trash you. I don't know if it's they don't understand or what, but they
don't ask.
they automatically assume that her and I are in a relationship because she's
we're
living
not.
in my house and saying, oh, well, you guys are married, this and that. Oh, you're
I've
a
had them
whore.
come to me and make the comment, oh, well, God's punishing you, you really should get your life together. And I'm like, excuse me? I talk to God every day. I'm not sinning. I'm begging God to help me, but I really feel that God is helping me. He's helping me by helping others.
But these same people never
this.
offered
No.
to help or anything. And I know from going over at the ranch before I get involved with helping her out and moving her into my house and stuff that, she had plenty of friends when everybody had horses that they wanted to ride.
Yeah.
Bring my children over there. I could drop them off. It's a daycare center. I don't have to mess with them. We'll leave the kids over there. They can learn to ride, and I could go out and, do whatever. But as soon as she got sick,
Nobody.
I couldn't find one person. And I tried finding somebody to help her with the ranch and stuff, to come out, just shovel some horse crap. I know that's not a very rewarding job, but it is when there's kids involved.
Thank you, Robin. I just got your message.
Okay, yeah, we have stuff still coming in on YouTube and stuff. But and this whole thing is not to get any subscribers or readers or anything. It's to get her story out, and it's not even to bash the doctors. These doctors should, take a couple extra seconds. And I know it's the whole cattle line thing, get them in, get them out as fast as you can out of the emergency room. But the one thing that they don't see is that, and there are some great doctors. Dr. Hernandez, one of the best doctors I've ever met. And I've got great doctors.
When you look healthy,
But
they don't.
then you have one or two, and just one person not taking the time just to squat down and have that little bit of training to look in your eyes and say, can you blink once for yes and twice for no?
That's all it would have taken.
And then just ask them, are you crazy? People that are nuts know it. I know I'm crazy. I'm nuts. I'll admit it. But you can laugh about that. But not to take that extra second or that extra minute. One word on a paper, psychosomatic, can screw it up where you don't get help.
My whole life.
Yeah.
And it can ruin. It's been, 3.5 years?
3 years. It ruined my
3
whole
years
life.
of fighting every doctor, getting her into the doctors.
To this day, I'm still. I have like 4 doctors. I can't see anybody because nobody wants me. Because I'm too complicated or because I've been Baker acted. And I went to my eye doctor, and my eye doctor told me one of his stories. He said that his son was a baby, and his son was sick and having problems all the time. He was I think he was 2. And the doctors and the nurses would all do hush-hush stories and look at there's that father again and accuse him of doing things. And he said he had a friend that did, and excuse me if I'm getting it wrong, I'm trying to remember it. But he said that he had a friend that suggested they do an ultrasound, and the baby had, I think he said he had gallstones at 2 years old, which is just unheard of. But again, we get labels. Instead of getting help, you get labeled. And people look at us, and you've seen those pictures. Travis, can you put that one up there of the young lady with all the spots on her, all the way at the bottom, Chris, right there, please. You look at that, and I see on Facebook, I see people make the most horrible, nasty comments about that. We don't ask for that. Our body gives that to us.
The other way.
I've heard it say it's a sin, it's a curse. I've heard people say, oh, look at that. They make the most horrible comments. But you know what? That's that person's life, and we have to live with that. And that is the most painful disease, because that disease, it's like it causes itching. It causes the most horrible pain on all of your nerves that you can't get it under control. But you have to walk in public, and we're still human beings on the inside. We're the same person on the inside. And you need to look through that shell. You can't look at that person's spots. You can't look at their handicap. You got to look at their personality and who they are. And Travis, the day he came to me, when I was sitting in that wheelchair and I could not move, was the first one to look at me and look in my eyes and just say, hey, what can I do to help? He never looked at me like I was handicapped. He treated me like the same person I was before I was in the wheelchair as I was after that wheelchair. And he has kept me going. He has never let me stop fighting. The days I've
No. I told you a long time ago. I'll help you out, but the day you give up is the day I give up. I'm not the one that has to fight. You're the one that has to fight. It's easy for me to make sometimes it's easy, but to pick up the phone and make a few phone calls. It's not that difficult to go in and fight with a doctor. I'm not the one that's doing it. You're the one that has to do it day in and day out, and I told you that. It's nothing for you to sleep in my house. I can shove a mouth guard in your mouth. You're going to bite your tongue in half. But you're the one that has to live with it and deal with it. And at some point, I bought something out here for her in case she started crying right there.
Oh, your t-shirt is a reminder.
It's one of my t-shirts. I can't tell you how many t-shirts she's messed up. You're not getting Kleenex. You get a t-shirt. But it's not me that has to go through this. And you know, again, with the doctors and stuff and people just in the medical field, and there's some great doctors over Shands. I'm not knocking Shands at all.
Take the time.
You know, I've seen people go in there and they do wonderful things. Matter of fact, we've got a show coming up about a guy who lost part of his calf and the bottom of his foot to a lawnmower accident. And the guy was living on rats and roaches. He was homeless. And they were able to somewhat reconstruct the bottom of his foot, and they saved his life. But you know, that's for another show. But you're the one that has to live with it and deal with it, not me. You have to deal with a little bit, but you know.
But just all we're doing is, I'm not sharing my story to come down on anybody. I'm sharing my story, like I said, to help someone. I want those doctors to stop. Everybody said, well, you got a lawsuit on your hands. Do you know what I wanted? I never wanted money. I wanted to talk to that doctor, sit him down, and tell him all the things I have been through in my life because he didn't take the time to see what was wrong with me.
Oh, he's not going to talk to you. I mean,
No, that's all
between
I ever
him
wanted.
and 4 or 5 other doctors, they've all bailed on you.
I just want everybody to take the time. When the person, and I had a young lady the other day, and I'm sorry I did this, but she was going to be a nurse, and she's studying to be a nurse, and I grabbed her by the hands. I was like, please, you got to promise me if you ever have a patient come in that can't talk, you got to look them in the eyes. Once for yes and twice for no. Just promise me you'll look them in the eyes. You don't understand. Anybody who can't talk for themselves, and Travis could ask you, I would be screaming at the top of my lungs inside, but I couldn't talk.
If you need a second, that's okay.
Thank you, Jesse. I just got your message. Travis.
You know, people are sending their messages in on
But it's hard because I have a ranch, like Travis said, right next door. I can see my horses, but I can't get to them. I can't walk that far. I can furniture walk about 20 feet, or I can get 20 feet. But after that, my body starts giving out. If I go over to my horses, I'm done for the rest of the day. It drags me out so much. But it's so hard because I miss my ranch. I miss my animals. I miss the kids. I miss the people. My favorite thing in the world to do is help people. I want to be over there. I want to use that ranch to get back to helping people. And it's really hard to hand that over to somebody because I put every child, every person's life in my hands at that ranch. And I'm proud of what I do. And that's a lot of responsibility. And when you've got to hand that kind of responsibility over to somebody, it's not personal, but you want to know that kid's safe. You want to know that that person has that everything in their hearts, and you can't train someone to care. Because people will be on their cell phone and they don't think about everything. But I love it. It was my passion. It was my drive to help others. I miss all the veterans, and it's my ranch is falling down around me, and it's so hard to sit here because I'm a worker. I hate 4 walls. You go stir crazy sitting behind 4 walls. I miss being outdoors. I miss riding a tractor. I miss walking out in the yard. I miss walking just to go get the mail. People don't realize what being handicapped can do to you. Just not being able to get out of the house and go for a drive.
And you're still not able to walk.
No, I can get little distances, but I can't go far. And now it's getting to where I can't do that anymore either. So, and I'm getting more tired more easy, and it's very hard.
Yeah, thanks, Robin. Robin Harper just wrote in, and she said she was sorry to hear it, and some in other messages, and Jesse too. You know, Robin is one of the people we feature on the radio and a radio station. If you guys haven't listened to her, plug in IITW radio and pop her music on. She's incredible. I don't know why they haven't sucked her up and carried her out to Nashville already.
No, she's amazing.
Yeah, she sure is.
But yeah, thank you, Jesse. Yeah, I'm sure she's going to read the stuff later. It's kind of hard for her to see everything right now on here. But you know, again, you've come a long ways. They've told you 4 or 5 times now you'll be dead in 3 months.
I have died and come back.
Yeah, well. Yeah, and then had people saying that I was just wanting her ranch or whatever, and I'm like, really? Well, why do they keep doing CPR and bringing her back?
That's what I said. You're crazy.
I don't
and
want.
they call me crazy. He's the one taking care of me, and they call me crazy.
I have 2 dogs, and you know, every now and again, and a cat, and every now and again, want to crap in the house. What do I want with something that big that's going to make that much poop? You know, all I need is another animal. Nah, I love my horses, but you know, you're not going anywhere. We have a deal. she's not allowed to die because at some point when I reach 150, she's going to have to wipe my butt. So until I hit that point, she has to stay alive.
I'll always be there. But I want to tell everybody I love them and appreciate them, and I appreciate you watching and listening to my story. And please just spend the time with the ones you love. Put down the cell phones and just spend 5 extra minutes with them, because you never know what tomorrow's going to hold. I was healthy my whole life, and then one day I couldn't move.
Well, you've had some. You've also had, besides some. Trying to keep my mouth clean here. Besides having some people who didn't care in the medical industry, you've also had some good people like, Dr. Newton, Dr. Hernandez, Misty over to Zelia Health and Willaca. Shout out. Anytime I've called over there to let Misty know what's going on, she's quick to get, whatever, Angie, get to the doctors and help Angie get whatever she needs. And unfortunately with the insurance companies and stuff, they suck. They don't, they don't, I know. Oh, I gotta be me. They don't, you're only allowed to get so many of this, a year, or so many tests a year. So right now she's waiting on more tests, which are going to be a year from now. And when I was talking to this lady with the Neurofibromatosis Foundation, she was telling me that they've already raised over $300 million for research and stuff, which is amazing that they're doing that. And the one lady who's actually the president, her daughter had it, and I did not know that it went back some 30 years. 30 years ago, her daughter was diagnosed with it. And like I say, this is not something that just, it's not like sickle cell where it affects blacks, or you have different diseases that affect different cultures. This doesn't care, male, female, transgender, gay, heterosexual, it doesn't matter. It will attack anybody it wants, and it is not contagious, by the way. So if you see somebody with the bumps on them like that, and you're going up, and you're making fun of them, don't. Go up and ask them. Go up and give them some encouragement. Don't just sit there and whisper. There's nothing in the world worse to a person that has a debilitating disease or anything else to them, whether it's a missing limb or anything else, or like little Levi that has was burned in the fire with all the scars. There's nothing worse to a person than hear you whisper. Don't do it in front of them. Don't do it behind their back. Get well away from them before you start asking questions by yourself. And I found out, and I will do it all the time, I'll walk up and ask people, how'd you lose the leg? I'm not going to sit there and stare. I want to know what the thing is. What are all those lesions on you? And it relaxes them, lets them feel more confident when they're in public. And I'm no saint, trust me. Tammy will tell you that. She's known me since we were in middle school. But you got anything to say, Tammy?
I think you guys have pretty much covered everything. I've been around quite a few times during Angie's, all the things that Angie's been through. She's been through so much. She's a fighter. There's no doubt about that. She's had a lot of hard issues that she's had to deal with, but no matter what she's had to deal with, she's come out on the other side of all of it. And like I always say she's like a cat. She's got 9 lives. And
She got to quit using them up, though.
I know. I don't want her to run out of them. That's for sure. Because, we want her to be around with us for a long, long time. And I think she's going to. I think she's going to defy the odds and everything that the doctors have said. Because she just, I think God's got a purpose for her. And I don't think she's fulfilled that purpose yet, whatever it is. And I think she's going to be here with us for a long time.
I'm trying.
Yeah, in this summer.
Oh, I think you're going to succeed.
Yeah, I do too, or I wouldn't be doing this.
Right?
And like I say again, I'm no saint. What I'm doing, anybody could do. The problem with people is people that can do it, a lot of them just don't do it. And that's not right, because once you know something, you can't unknow it. And for somebody you can help out, You just need to help them out. That's what we were put on this planet for, to take care of this planet and take care of our neighbors. That's what used to be great about this country before everybody got so self-centered and turned into a bunch of pricks and racists and everything else, is that when I was a kid growing up, if the farmer's crops needed moved and getting them out to harvest, if he couldn't do it, you went and helped him. You know, Miss Ledbetter's outhouse need moving again. That woman, I swear, she crapped more than anybody I've ever seen in my life. You go help move the outhouse, no matter what it is. And when people don't even know their neighbors, and they make race a big issue, or poke fun at people that have disabilities, it's just not right. And this country is never going to return to where it was until that changes.
Exactly.
So I want to thank you very much, Angie.
Thank you.
You're a sweetheart. I know there's a lot of
Share
people
my
watching
story.
because I can see the numbers.
Yeah.
And you know, we all have faith in you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay? You go ahead and take her picture down.
Okay.
She's getting ready to walk out of the studio.
I'll walk out, crawl out.
Not walk out, crawl out.
I'm looking for the walkout day.
You
I'm
got a
still
wheelchair.
working on that.
We'll yell at my son. I can throw you in the vehicle or we'll call him.
God bless you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Angie.
All right.
Lee sent a message over. She says she's going to kill you.
Lee did?
Yes.
Oh, well, maybe she'll watch. She missed last week's show, so that's what you get, Lee. I still love you.
Did she? Oh, of course we love her. She still says she's going to kill you.
I'm trying to get out of this. Leave me alone.
Us girls got to stick together now.
You know, if you guys, Cameron at the end of this is going to put up the links to the Neurofibromatosis Foundation and stuff. You guys can give. I mean, if it's only 50 cents, every penny helps and every dollar helps. And they will be coming on the show here in the next couple of months. We're kind of booked up until January, but I am going to squeeze them in because I think this is very important. And I did not know that it was as common as it is. You know, I'm thinking, you know, what, 1 in every billion or 1 in every million. But for one, you know, in every 2,500, that's an incredible amount.
I had no idea it was that common either.
And there's also 2 types, even though it's the same type, neurofibromatosis in F1 and F2, 50% of it is hereditary. And if one of the parents has it, and they can pass it on to their child. But that isn't always what happens. And I forget the name of what they call it, but it can just pop up on its own, even without having a family history of it. And they don't know why that happens. And that's what happened in Angie's case. Her dad had genetic testing. You know, they tested the brothers, the moms, the sisters, all that. And it turns out that it's not hereditary. Mm-hmm. It's just something that reared its ugly head up, whether it was medication or something she ate or a combination of things that just happened. Spontaneous mutation is what it's called. Mm-hmm. God, that's a mouthful. But
yes, it is.
It can just happen at any time. So nobody's immune from it. It's like LS. You know, it can happen. Some of these kids that I read about, you know, it happened at, was someone, if you go to the neurofibromatosis .org, I believe it is, they'll have the link up, but you can see a little girl in there that's 7 years old. It's it's www.nfnetwork.org. And they have a couple of videos of little kids, and they also have videos of older people. There's not as much help from what I understand for older people. And, you know, people in their 30s as there is for the children. Because if they can catch it early enough, then although there's no cure for it, they can still suppress a lot of the stuff. You know, whether it's with radiation. But after talking to some of the doctors down there, you know, they really don't like to radiate because it can cause the stuff to spread. And hopefully they'll find a cure for it, you know. You know, they just signed in that new law, right to try. And there
Hopefully
are
that'll
drugs.
help.
There are drugs and experimental things that are out there, and if you contact the neurofibromatosis center, they will give you links to where you can go in and look at some of the experimental stuff that's going on.
That's awesome.
But the thing is to donate. You know, if you got a couple extra bucks, because you don't know if this is going to happen. And 1 in 23 to 3,000 people, those odds are pretty high that somebody you know or somebody in your family is going to have it. And the other thing I can't stress and say it enough is to these people that are in the medical field, when you have somebody come in, if they can't talk to you, I was just looking at some notes I have on my desk. If they can't talk to you, maybe it's a pretty good reason. You know, maybe like in her case, the neurofibers have shut down her vocal cords or the part in her brain where it allows the speech to happen. You know, but ask them once to blink, yes. Twice to blink, no. That's pretty stinking simple. And for you other doctors that are out there for the money of it and not the patient's care, remember why you went to med school. Remember the oath that you took. It's to help people, not shove them off so you can get the next one in there to get your Mercedes payment or your Lexus payment or whatever it is. You know, it's just not right. Take the time. I can see you're going to say something. Please don't
their
tell me to
oath
leave
is-
back on there.
No, their oath is to do no harm, and that doesn't sound like they're doing no harm when they treat a patient that way. You know,
That does. Well,
that's
look,
harmful.
you know, if she would have got the diagnosis 3 years ago and doctors would have still tried to help her instead of labeling her as crazy, imagine where the symptoms that they could
Exactly.
have taken down because it's been one drug after another after another.
Yeah, and so many of the medications that they prescribe, you know, they cause more symptoms than they help sometimes.
Exactly. Oh, it was the same with the one drug that she was on. You know, it was causing her to bleed. It was causing her
Right.
her blood sugars to skyrocket and then drop down. And I'm talking in a matter of seconds, not
Right.
hours or minutes. In seconds, it would be 124. Then it would drop down to 3
The propranolol.
propranolol.
Yeah, I remember that.
And when I told the doctor, I'd read that, you know, in one of the things at John Hopkins, he said, "Oh well, I'm better. I'm smarter than they are." Like really, you got 7 or 9 different doctors sitting there talking about, you know, how this causes this and that and that, and you're saying you're smarter than them? I think not.
No.
Or you wouldn't be working in this
That's
small town.
the God syndrome that some doctors have. Not all of them, but, you know, there's a few out there.
Yeah. You know, like I say, there's a lot of wonderful doctors. I mean, Flagler Hospital.
There are.
Those guys are great. Hell, they
Oh,
kept me
yeah.
alive twice. They've done 2 heart surgeries and, you know, and even my
Yeah.
cancer doctor. That guy's great.
Yeah,
Dr. Schmieder.
definitely.
Shout out.
Yeah, you do. You had some really great doctors there.
Yeah, that's because I tell them you're my friend and they're all terrified of you.
Is that why? My reputation precedes me.
Pretty much. We got dropped on Radio Co, but we're still on YouTube.
Are we?
Yeah.
Well, it's not like,
Okay.
it's not like you ended in the middle of a story. It was after a sentence.
Okay, well, what's going on with it? Because we got to get it up because we got to close it out. For the people on YouTube, we're still here. Yay.
Yay.
We got a
Do
minute
we
and
have
8.
anybody? We have 6 people watching us on YouTube, or we have more than
No,
that?
there's a lot more than that.
I think the
Okay.
website's acting spotty.
We would like to thank the folks
No,
that
we're
are
back on
watching
the air
us on
on
YouTube.
Radio Co.
Okay. Oh, okay, great. We
So,
want to thank everybody that's watching us right now. We want to ask you guys to go to Facebook and like both of our pages over there on Facebook. We have the Putnam Way, we have IITW radio pages. Go on there and take a look at what we have to offer and give us a like. And what else did you have to say tonight, Travis?
Yeah, check us out. I mean, it's on Twitter, Snapchat, not Snapchat. I'm not familiar with all this stuff. You already said
No.
it. So, I want to thank you guys for listening. And remember, donate to the neurofibromatosis place. The link will be up after this. And I want to thank you guys for listening and bearing with us and letting Angie. I want to thank Miss Wright for sharing her story with us. And we'll see you next time. God willing, the creek don't rise and the government don't get me first.
Good night, all.